Yeah, that's basically why we have some questions for you to see what, in terms of the entire progress you've made since we last talked, and then moving forward. But I will kick off the recording if you're ready, and then we can have full details. You can hear me okay because I'm not using the external mic.
No, I'm hearing you fine.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Let's do it.
Recording in progress.
This is Colin Digits. I'm here with Frank from Apeiron, Digits Club AMA round 2, going into more detail on the Apeiron project, the current market conditions, and what has happened so far. Frank, thank you for being here again.
Quite glad to be back, Colin.
My pleasure. Overall, you had very good answers last time, so I'm very curious to see. Now we got to know everything about Apeiron, what the next steps are. Last time you explained to us the God game, how it works, the mechanics. We ran through the tokenomics, but then of course you completed the planet sale, right? That was one of the big happenings. How did that go for you?
Oh, we did two great things, two pretty interesting things after our AMA. One is the planet sale, which we did before our seed round. We sold 1,600 ETH worth of planets over Easter and before the seed round. We didn't sell out though. We had to burn around, I think, 5 to 10%, around around 10% of the planets. Plus, but we sold quite a lot of it, and we sold them at pretty much above average price, not just 0.1. Only a quarter of them got sold out pretty quickly for 0.1. All the other ones were priced pretty high. But we still did pretty well. And of course, we ended it after 3 or 4 days, and then we moved on to seed round. Well, actually, seed round was supposed to end before that, because probably want the support of all the investors from seed round to support our planet sales. But ultimately, the decision was to delay the seed round and carry on with the planet sales, because I think it's just the way the seed round goes in crypto. You meet bigger and bigger people, and by the time you say you're ending the seed round, suddenly everyone jumps on the calls, even the big boys. And the big boys take their time, their sweet time. And I get introduced to a lot of other interesting people. And so I didn't want to end it hastily. It's the biggest round we have, and we want to find the right partners. So we decided to postpone the seed round to give more time for the bigger players to get introduced to us, and to take my time to really select the right partners instead of going into really hasty decisions. But all in all, it's pretty well. I think we did a pretty successful raise. We raised 10 million from seed, coupled with the 3.5 in pre-seed, that's 13.5. We didn't just raise it with tokens though, because we want to promote that Apeiron as a game. And a blockchain game entails both the NFTs and the tokens. So we sold our investments in NFT packages, where it encompasses the planets itself, the stars, the land, and the tokens. So it gives them a more comprehensive coverage of what Apeiron entails instead of just tokens. And
was that only for the guilds, or did also the VCs participate on the NFT side?
Actually, quite a lot of natives participated in the NFT packages. The ones that did not purchase are usually bound by mandates or the way they set up their companies, and sometimes in the States or in some tier 1 countries, so they can only take tokens. But most others took the NFT packages. That's why we raised quite a lot, 13.5, and then we did around 4.5 from the planet sales, and now we're in private round right now, and we raised almost half of it. Actually, I'm signing the remainder of the SAFs this week, so that brings it to a total of around 21 million that we've raised. Pretty big numbers.
Job. Yeah, definitely.
We're a game. And we've been signing not just crypto natives and gaming guilds. It's pretty much a mix of everyone on our roadmap. We're only beginning from the gaming guilds and from the Web3 crowds, so they make up for around half of our cap table. The other half is on esports and streaming, and a lot of them are actually from the Web2. We have giant physical gaming card communities, streamers from Twitch, from YouTube, esports teams, players. A lot of gaming guilds are backed by esports teams as well. And then we have some old-time AAA publishers, and we have AAA developers, the real AAA ones, and also some giant mobile game developers that's looking to invest into blockchain and Web3.
From the cap
A bit of
table, it was
everyone.
basically all very strategically, well, handpicked, if I understand it. It wasn't so
Yeah.
much about raising the money, but more so about picking the right
Let's
parties.
say even given the economic situation now, a lot of investors are still cash rich actually. With a lot of people have done very well for themselves over this past year, and they've gathered quite a significant amount of money. And a lot of them are playing it safe, diversifying and getting ready. And it's in these times that sometimes you can get to pick the ones that made the right decisions and choices. And they're still very bullish on the entire Web3 crowd, the projects and everything, and they're shopping around. And didn't really get much setback in regarding of anything. And we got pretty lucky actually, because we ended seed round and most of private round around early last week. And I remember after our seed round ended, I was asking 2 weeks ago a lot of our investors and advisors. So we raised quite a lot of money, a lot of stables. So where do I put them for yields? I think almost half of them included Anchor in one of their recommendations.
Yeah.
It's normal. It's normal. It's 20% in stables. Who wouldn't be attracted? And I was attracted in the beginning, but our co-founders weren't very bullish on Luna. But anyway, I was almost going to put some there, but I was just too damn busy with all the meetings after meetings. And by the time I
Right.
looked back, the market crashed, and I was like, holy crap! I got really lucky there. And so yeah, we were looking at the market, and we were actually planning to do our next big thing is actually the community round and the token launch, which we want to set in early June. We were already in talks with all top 5 exchanges, and we were well underway. I think 2 of them already cleared our listing, and just waiting for me to give the go ahead to we're going to launch it. But that happened, and everyone was reeling from the attack, and some of them even outright just said it's not just to me but also to other developers I'm talking to right now, and they say almost most of the exchanges are not advising any token launch in 2 months. They said that in last Friday though, so that was pretty much at the bottom. So
Right.
hopefully when the market sentiments turn a little better, they'll have a little more opening. But still, I think it's time to really step back and look at how the market is, how the sentiments are going. Still, I think people are very uneasy. The talk of winter has been around the mouths and corners for every investor's mind for
What
quite
do
some
you
time
think
now.
about that?
I think I actually am not as skeptical as most of them are. I think there are a lot of projects here that may be bloated, and there are a lot of alluring projects with great yields and everything. But what crypto have evolved from since 2018 is quite different. The stables, excluding Luna, are pretty stable. When the moment Luna fell and USDT fell, most of my investors, myself included, pretty much played arbitrage from USDC to USDT. It was a good move. It was reasonable. If you look at the statistics, the numbers, the backing, everything is very solid. Even if half of the crypto caps were to sell out or to dump the tokens, I think they can pretty still stand quite still actually. So we weren't as gingerly about this whole situation. We believe I've been talking with a lot of investors and developers and builders, and though a lot of it focuses on hype-based sentiments and price
Right.
bumps, actually most of them are still very sound in terms of investments and their logics. the biggest funds I talk to have so much cash reserves, and their investment philosophies are very great, and they are holding 8 to 9 digit treasuries to invest in, and they're picking their picks very carefully. And so there's still a lot of hot money around. But of course, the general sentiment and the new investment atmosphere has been significantly hampered, I'd say. And so most of the developers I know and most of the partners I know advocate the projects to maybe focus more on building and do a little less marketing, try to focus more on the project's fundamentals to survive the coming quarter at least. That's the general sentiment that may be happening. But I think that's normal. Sell in May is typical mindset for most Web2 funds and financial institutions. And the market typically rebounds around October. Hopefully that's similar for crypto. And if you ask me, I think it would be a little faster even. I myself love buying on pessimism and selling on optimism. So in the market times, when it's such a market, it's actually the best time to go in. I made some plays myself during last Friday and Thursday with my own money, of course, not with the company's treasury.
Of course, yeah.
I still haven't moved a single dime in the treasury. I was really tempted to play some arbitrage with my company's treasury, but still probably not to move it during these times. I probably play something much more safe there later. But for my own play money, I did some funny moves. Was dangerous actually looking back at it, but yeah, it's always enticing over there, and the crypto is fun to play these games. But
Definitely.
then again, yeah, I know a lot of people lost a lot of money, and from my communities and everything, a lot of people actually lost their savings and were really down and desperate. And I gave this advice in another talk I did with another podcast, is that I've been in the financial world for 10 years, and I've have friends who purely trade, made their livings on trading and everything. And there are times in many of our lives that we bet big and we lose big, and you get on tilt. And when you get on tilt, every decision you make afterwards tends not to be a great decision. Many people I know get down on Luna and is trying to get back into Luna to make that sweet maybe 200 and 300% jump, trying to get the jump before the other guys and maybe scrape on this. But these decisions that are made on tilt typically is even more risky, and sometimes I think it's more important to take a break when you lose really big, instead of diving into that on tilt mentality to really try to recover what you had.
Yeah, it's also how you lose perhaps, right? Because when you mentioned that people lost a lot of their savings, it depends on your investment philosophy. Of course, I did a very bad trade on Luna, basically a little gamble, as you said. You mentioned the percentages, but I mean, like there was a lot of money, right? But for me, relative to my portfolio, it was little money, right? And then for other people, things are different. Like I seen messages of people said like, "Oh, my savings were in Anchor," and I do think that investing, the general rules are invest only what you can lose. So if savings are being put into these things, and it depends on like, 10% of your savings, okay, but if it's like 80, 90% of your cash on hand that you risk, it's not free money. Such a high APR always carries risk, right? Even the rebates, like 2,000% APR, if anything offers more than 800% APR, it's a Ponzi economy, right? There's something definitely wrong, because nobody can print money out of nothing. It's always a supply and demand. And I feel like you have to experience it once. And I experienced the crash in 2017, where everything, I think I did 6 figures in 2017, and it ended up being, I think, something like $18,000. So it went down by 85%. From that, I learned. So this time when everything went down, I didn't get burned, right? But people, you have to go through it, you have to experience it, and it will, as you said, once you get emotional, the worst thing you can do is then make decisions based on the emotions, because that you only see the opportunity and you ignore maybe the potential risk. What do you think in terms of risk for yourself, Apeiron, moving forward? Let's say if the TGE, the listing, would be postponed beyond June, how does that affect the roadmap, or doesn't it affect it? What do you think?
We are actually postponing the TGE right now as we speak. As much as I want to squeeze out a little liquidity to play some staking, breeding, and community engagement, the general sentiment and the roadmap is just, well, it needs adjustment. So we're postponing our TGE and our community round to a later date. I think most of the games developers and the general sentiment is they prefer the game launch, or at least the alpha and the beta launch, before the token launch, to get a better feeling of the game and the community. We will push the token launch later, but not so late after the game launch in our minds. The Apeiron is a giant game with multiple mechanics, and there are really a lot of different utilities for game tokens other than just the game itself. There's staking, there's breeding, there's the land gameplay, and we're also testing the battle early, so there's a lot of everything that we want to test. And honestly, we like giving to the community. Even in these 2 weeks, we notice a lot of people have trouble with their treasuries or with their the banks. So we hosted many play to earn events each night. Almost gave out 8,000 USDC worth of tokens, actual USDC actually, in different events. Game play to earn nights just to get the minds off the current markets for most people, or to help each other out, I guess. But for us, will the TG affect the development pipeline? Maybe slightly, but to be honest, I'd say none. Only the on-chain functions get delayed, and the way Apeiron was built with game at its core. So the game development has always been priority, while the token and the functions are being remodeled right now. We were prepared to do the whole game without tokens in the beginning anyway. But for the on-chain functions, which comes first and which comes later, actually can be adjusted. That's what we are actively adjusting now. And I think this is actually a lot, well, happier for most investors and exchanges. They want to see more substantial gameplay and everything before the token launch. And so yes, we will push it later. We are doing our beta testing, our closed beta testing in Q3, and we'll couple that together with the token launch. We realize that most people view the token price as more of a marketing tool and a gauge for the game reception. So yeah, we've always planned to do more marketing acquisition than support when the token launches.
What about, for example, vesting schedules? Is that something you have considered? Would you keep them the same as in the papers, or would you perhaps, now the market is bearish, reconsider them, make them longer, make them shorter, or is that not something you would be having a second look at?
If we delay the token launch, the only problem for most people will is whether the vesting will also be delayed or will be shortened because we have a later token launch. We're still deciding that, but most likely we're going to keep it the same because still Apeiron has been, well, a really long-term project. The vesting and unlocking has always been long, actually, to begin with.
Right.
So we most people don't mind that. But depending on the reception and the speed with which we're going to build the team and games, the original vesting begins actually in Q1 in 2023, coupled with our giant esports events, the first giant esports events that's around the time. And that would be a good time to unlock for the investors, just so the token price can be lowered a little bit when we go into esports and streaming to allow for a more approachable price for the tokens.
Right.
But if it's delayed, how will we handle the token price and everything?
To be considered later.
It has to be considered. I think making decisions right now to heavily modify anything too drastic would be maybe exactly on the tilt moment. And so we will make a more adaptable model where our where our staking and our breeding mechanisms, which is opening up early, to be less reliant on the token price and the tokens itself. We are restructuring a new planet staking model. Previously, we don't have NFT staking and planet staking early, but we're going to develop a NFT staking early so the planet owners can stake their planets together with any other currency we choose. We'll probably work with some of the some of our partners who have a token already to promote some collaboration work, and have them stake and earn some rewards, or for in-game items, or for the future planet or land sales, and it rewards back to the planet holders. And so, yeah, we're devising something like that. It's less reliant on the token price, and it gives us more flexibility. Right. And then when the token launches, that's when we have the game testings around that time. We should be able to build more traction the other way. And we are still talking with a lot of investors now, even more and more actually. Lots of launch pads and developers, and still many crypto natives from around the world is talking. So the general atmosphere is great. Still trying to find a way for to really help ease the community's minds back. I think these things just take time. We can't really force it.
Yeah, it would definitely take some time. People need to adjust, like you and me, we're in this crypto space every day, but a lot of people, they just check in, twice a week, but also external pressure from other investors, these type of things. Previously, you mentioned 5 possible exchange listings. I don't assume you were referring to launchpads in that case, no? You were referring to
5 exchange listings are pretty much Binance, FTX, KuCoin, OKX, and Coinbase. These are the top 5 exchanges who I've been talking to. But we've also been talking with a lot of launchpads. Recently talked with CDFI, very interesting bunch of fellows there, and many gamers oriented. And then there's Engine Starter. Always been a pleasure to talk with Joseph over there, who's a fellow Mass Effect fan. And talking with, many other launchpads. There's Red Kite, there's from Southeast Asia, there's Ice-T Labs. There's also Rainmaker, DAO Maker. There's
how do you make the distinction between
listed.
all these parties? What do they offer where you're like, this one might be a more suitable party, or what are their proposals like in terms of what you consider? Because they all have an expertise, right? You name some of the biggest brands in crypto. It must be difficult because I assume they also have demands in what they want, right? So when you have
most
this whole
of the
list,
most of the demands are pretty straightforward. Certain percentage from your total token allocation. Most of them target around 2% for the giant launchpads, or for certain for launchpads. It would be incubation plus the launch. It would typically entail around 2 to 3% everything. But the general sentiments for most launch pads is typically because because they are more associated with IDOs and decentralized exchanges. And decentralized exchanges and IDOs and launch pads are typically more susceptible to bot trading, and the communities over there are more prone to find the next coin to flip. So our larger investors, and myself included, is not the super big fan of most of the launch pads. But there are some launch pads out there that really take their time to pick the projects and have proven a pretty nice track record of launches. So never hurts to talk to a few of them. But for me, I will work with a few launch pads because it's just how I work. In the early days of Apeiron.
What does that mean, Frank? When you say that's just how I work, is it a connection or?
It's not a connection. There are launch pads out there, even seedy ones, and investors actually that's not as reputable, tier 3 or 4, but they took a genuine interest in Apeiron early, before the giant investors or the giant gaming guilds came in. They looked at us pretty bare-boned with this high valuation we're at, and they said they're interested and they wanted allocation. These people helped make doors and connections available early before I signed anything with them. And they really want in. So now the giant big boys are in, the officials ones are in, and they all hate launch pads. But in my eyes, some of these investment funds and some of these launch pads have helped us. I think some projects is common practice to build from the smaller guys to the mid-sized guys. And once they get the giant big lead, the big lead usually takes a huge bite and everyone gets knocked out or downsized. But I want to follow through with the commitments I made. And after all, they didn't request that much allocation. So I want to follow through. So some of the other investors, investment funds and some launch pads here is going to stay. And I want to honor the agreement I had with them to not just use them and then leave them hanging. I don't think that's a good practice. That's not the way I work. So yeah, I will work with some launch pads.
It's more about an ethical, personal point of view, and I can respect that. I mean, it's not something we see often. So yeah, kudos for at least supporting.
But that's interesting. Yeah, well, there's a bit of everyone, but still, some of them and their communities do have pretty shady track records. A lot of them got a little too happy with their investments and their community, especially during the end of last year when the crypto was at its heights, pumping a lot of projects and everything and investing wildly into many projects. But yeah, well, I like to take my pick, and if they show genuine interest, I appreciate them. There are a lot of other funds come in right now based on the investment leads or the gaming guilds or the amount of funds we have garnered.
Who are the investment leads actually, Frank, on your
now,
the leads?
Actually, I don't really believe in leads, but the most giant anchor, I'd say that the biggest investment comes from Hashed. Hashed is this Korean fund and pretty deeply tied to Lunar as well. And but they have invested quite a lot in Apeiron, 2.5 million, and we work closely with Hash, and we pretty much chose Hashed out of a lot of other possible leads because Hashed coincides with our roadmap greatly. We want to start from Web3, but we are going to move to esports. We are going to move to franchising. And Rear, Hashed's home base and hometown, has been one of the best esports hub in this world. Their franchising models, their pop culture is spreading around the world. Their movies, their TV series are getting noticed around the world, and they've been doing great in terms of this franchising and export of licensing, which was previously extremely dominated by the States and Japan. And new players in the field. Well, thanks to Netflix a bit, I guess. So there's a lot of different new TV series and developing teams springing about. But we want to learn from them, and we want to capture this especially the esports essence and the streaming essence. That's Korea. They have one of the most vibrant and the greatest crowds. Even Blizzard moved their headquarters over there for a while, or is still there, I think. And so yeah, we've got a lot to learn from them. And but yeah, Luna happened. It took a deep blow to them, but still standing. They're one of the most strongest funds out there with a lot of capital. But yeah, that's one of the core anchors in us. The other guys are pretty much well spread for the marketing and the European support, and we're pretty much overall Web3 support. There's Morningstar, there's Defiance, Spartan Group, and then there's IVC, and then there's also SVC from Hong Kong, local supporters. DFG and J Square came pretty late, but they still got in a little in the seed and private. They got a slot in seed and they got a bigger slot in the private round. And then we're still talking with almost all top 5 exchanges, labs, and venture arms to take a little longer to do that due diligence, but we saved the portion for them in private round. And
how long does such a thing usually take on these centralized exchanges? Because obviously would it mean, because we don't know, right? Would it mean if they join with their labs? So just an example, if Binance Labs would invest, does it mean they would also do the listing, or is that not something
No,
tied together?
they all very blatantly say it's never tied together. And
Okay.
and honestly, most of the labs invest very small ticket sizes. Usually, they don't invest heavily into much. Even for Binance, with the recent revamps, they did. I think their biggest ticket size is around 750 to a million. That's the biggest. Typically, it's a lot smaller, around 100 to 200K is what most labs and venture arms do. And they take a much bigger bite for their launch pads and their listing platforms. Binance could eat up to 6 to 8%, including market making and launch pads. But most other listings or IEOs typically take only around 2% of the liquidity. Some of them have listing fees, but the listing fees model is getting quite outdated, and a lot of them, even the old school ones that used to require listings fees, are removing them from the equation. And but yeah,
Right.
the recent events has caused a lot of them to tighten a lot of the windows and the requirements for them. But yeah, we'll see how things go.
Why do you think that they raise the requirements? Is it because they have risk? Because how I see it, if they would do an IEO, they get paid obviously a percentage of liquidity, as you mentioned, but I also make potentially significant revenue on the trading fees. What would be the significant risk to them? Is it just their
Well,
reputation?
most of them would really have to support the market by publishing articles and provide marketing support leading up to the launch. Typically, 1 to 2 weeks ahead of time is the required time for them to prepare the materials, the marketing support, and maybe after marketing support for the launch. And they've seen their fair share of crappy projects or crappy games and
Right.
they were a little happy with the less listing earlier. Every single one of them did, much like many investment firms. And so they want to do a more proper launch, and they want to be a bit more protective of the crowds, which is normal. And the general market sentiment is just very low right now, and the traditional idea, the mindset for IEOs and most of these listings is for fundraising. And much of crypto the hype and everything has been built around the initial big. This is actually the same. I'd say it's a double-edged sword. It's what garnered the most attention for crypto, but at the same time also garnered the most infamy for crypto, because these giant token launches on projects that seems to be created within the year or 2 years has been great for developers, great for short-term gains and everything. But the old world still despises crypto because of these launches, and it would take time for them to adjust and adhere to the different model. A lot of advisors, a lot of launch pads actually are advising their gaming guilds to lower their TGEs a bit, to not go too crazy with the price discovery approach of TGEs. I think it would take some time, or a new form of Dutch fork price discovery sales that's coming up in 2 months to really engage back the crowds. But I think that's
What would that mean? So if the TGEs would be lower, they flood the market with less tokens, so there's less initial. Yeah, or do you mean raising less money?
raising less money.
Okay.
Raising less. This is what I've been talking about for a long time before, is that we don't want to use our TGE as a price discovery method. But that's different because we have been developing our games for quite many years now, while many other developers need the funding to develop and market the game. Well, we mostly need the funding to market the game, so we don't have a higher fundraising requirement compared to us, although we've been raising quite a lot of money, actually. But for most other developers, they need to build a bigger war chest. There is a need, because game development is no easy task, and a lot of funds the general split between marketing and game development is 2-1. If you raise 80 million, 60 million typically goes to marketing. 50 to 60 goes to marketing, while the remaining goes to development. Marketing covers a lot, and for crypto marketing, it's actually a new industry. Find the right partners and very limited, and you don't even have to spend a dime for actually user acquisition, because we find the right KOLs, you find the right crowds to follow, and you go into really massive user acquisition on the Web3 though. But in the future, when you breach into Web2 and other such, typical marketing costs are very high right now. Our other game, Acid Rain World, is coming up, I think sometime within a month, over the next 2 weeks. And we follow a typical old user acquisition model from the click per install models from Facebook and Google. And during COVID, the user acquisition costs has pretty much doubled, even tripled during COVID. I guess because everyone's playing games and staying home. And so the costs have been increasing significantly to a point that even Web2 developers are looking into the KOL models, into Web2 models. Into Web3 models of how KOL and influencer marketing can impact user acquisition. And there's a lot of these different things going on. How did I end up talking about this thing? Remind me, Colin.
It's obviously, well, we went from the exchange and then it just kind of naturally went that way. But one of the questions might be interesting, what you said. You raised 13.5 million. The game is near the launch.
Oh, I remember
you didn't
now.
specifically have to raise that type of money. Why did you?
We wanted to find partners, and we wanted to find investors who actually, well, typically when you meet a fund and you want their commitment and attention, typically back in the days, a lot of small funds would shop around, spray and pray. Maybe they hold around 7 or 8 figure AUM, assets under management, but typically invest only in 100K or 200K here and there. And all they do is make introductions for exchanges, for KOLs, and they're pretty much a goner after getting the allocation, and they move on to find other projects. It's a fair business model for investment funds to do that. But for a game, for a developer, for us, I was in private equity for quite some time, so I'm more in the old school sense of commitments. So I pretty much want less investors like that, and ones that could really pay more attention to us. So for bigger funds with 7 or 8 figure AUMs, I typically require them to invest a lot more heftier. If $1 billion fund wants to invest 100K in Apeiron, I tell them maybe this is not the project the relationship we want.
Wouldn't they not bring enough attention to you in that case?
I think for optics, for name building, I think you only need a few. But what really helps a project in the long run is not just the branding. Branding helps with hype generation, with token raises. But in the long-term roadmap, will these big giant funds who have so many projects and so many prospects really focus on helping you build in the long term? If you are a star portfolio, if you garner enough attention, yes. But before that, how much time can they allocate to you? How much of their resources and efforts can really be spent on you, is other than their name, is honestly, well, very limited. That's why in our cap table, we do have not a lot of people, but everyone is investing in a sizable allocation. And a lot of the smaller gaming guilds that's in our private round right now invested 6 figures into our game. This is pretty insane for a lot of them because they actually don't have much assets. But it is exactly this commitment that made them want to ensure our success. They have been very picky. Everyone has been very picky with who they partner with. I was actually told not to list some of the names in my cap table in the official announcements, even to avoid this sentiment. But there are these things that the reputation at stake for other people. But I want people to commit the amount here that's to have enough skin in the game is important. And so yeah, they due diligence a lot of other cap table. They tell me a lot of things about the histories and the styles of different founders and investors. It's good. I learned a lot while speaking to them. But of course, it's not just rumors or gossips. I meet everyone myself to take a look at the team that's behind it. I believe in second chances. I believe there are people who have to do what they need to do in order to get the fund going, in order to get the liquidity and capital going.
Sure.
It's not the origin or how they start. It's really how they evolve and how they learn or how they work. So yeah. Looking for partners who can actually help with the roadmap. After all, not to be hubris, but the funds we are raising in crypto may sound a lot, but it's still incomparable to old Web2 industries. Apeiron may have raised 20 million so far, and in total we're going to raise around, after land sales and our private rounds in TGE, we're looking at around close to 40 million. But 40 million, if you look at how much development budget a real AAA costs, 40 million probably gets you close to a standard development cost of a AAA game. But the real big AAAs is not even half of it. And then they blow right through this. We're still pretty small, actually, compared to the real market out there. And the monies are still young, and there are still giant funds in crypto that's swimming about and looking to invest and make bigger changes and waves. And it's inspiring, actually, looking at how the cap table responded to this market situation. You see VC investors who typically invest with cash flow, and VCs are getting hurt and are really bulking up and becoming more protective of their investment plays. While the passionate builders, I'd say most of them got past with a bitter smile, and they're already moving on. And they were always prepared for this event. And so
well,
yeah,
there's something definitely to say for that, right? If you pioneer in the crypto space, because I think any company at this point is kind of pioneering, right? There's still a lot of new developments continuously, but also the hype, the bullish markets, that cannot only be bullishness, right? At some point, you have to live through maybe not even a long winter, but at least some bearish trends. And exactly like you say, the founders, either the founders that are experienced or the founders that have the right support, right, from VCs or whatever, they've been notified, assumingly, what to do in these type of situations. When you spoke about the Rain game, right, and then now Apeiron, is there anything already on the roadmap beyond Apeiron, or will the studio completely focus on Apeiron as is?
It will always be Apeiron. Apeiron is the core passion project that we want to build. We're still building merchandises around it. Our giant plushie doll is coming out, I think, at the end of this month. And then there's action figures, there's merchandise. Actually, we're working on merchandise with the community coming up to have them come up with designs, and then we'll publish this out.
Would you see that as like a revenue stream, the merchandise, or is it more of like a branding mechanic? Because I'm wondering how much money would that actually make, these things?
For most merchandises, if you look at typical Blizzard action figure models and game figure models, most collectible action figures don't actually are not used for revenue generation. It's more of a fan service or a brand building sort of thing, because the costs are actually quite high. But with the advent of NFTs, if you merge the two, there's actually, well, a slight chance of growing revenue. But this revenue does not go to us. It goes to the players and the collectors. The secondhand market for collectibles has always been a user's market, and NFTs make things pretty easier for them. And so we will create these dolls and figures and collectibles, and we will turn them into NFTs. As we're publishing them or selling them, it's most likely we don't it's very hard to take profit from this model unless it's economies of scales business. Typically in the old world, the toy merchandise market, the ones that make profit are the mass-produced toys, the ones you see in Walgreens, Toys R Us. That's really mass-produced. Collectible figures and action figures are tough business. They are very, very well-developed business. And in the Asian markets, they've been dominated by pretty much giant Bandai and toy developers, and they have developed this very, very efficient model where they can tell how much MOQ they have. This is slightly tour, but in the very, very old toy production business, typically you need to create a certain there's an MOQ, a minimum order that you need to order, and how you don't really know how much you can sell, so you have to gauge the market response to marketing. But nowadays there's pre-order. Everyone pre-orders, and the biggest toy brands with the biggest brands always do pre-orders, and they can very, very accurately calculate how much of one action figure or one toy needs to be produced before it was being marketed, before it's actually produced. And they work with all the giant toy manufacturers, and they have developed this system where even the toy manufacturer nowadays, they only work on pre-order model. So it's pretty tough for new toys and other IPs to enter the market to compete against them, actually. But with the invention of NFTs, even small developers and publishers can do that. We can gauge the market by using 3D designs, NFT designs, and interact with the communities to see if the model flies. I think a lot of the fashion NFTs are doing this nowadays to gauge the market. So they have these different 3D models, different NFTs in their fashion brands, and they'll market it to different users. Users will buy it. The ones that get traded most or receive the most attention will become actual products, and they can probably gauge the amount of numbers based on the rarity.
Yeah,
it's a great booming business for the fashion side, actually, and they can gain the revenue, and at the same time they can also be a little more accurate in terms of predicting their sales models. We can actually do that with toys, with 3D models and everything. We can determine which toys can get sold the best with 3D models and only produce with that. There's a whole new implication yet to be discovered.
Do you think that branding aspect, in terms of, I don't know how much time it takes to set up all that merchandising and everything, but it sounds like one of your bigger strategies, relevant to the time and effort that goes into that whole merchandising thing, relative to what we would normally expect is a revenue yielding time commitment? How does that weigh off in terms of like the branding marketing? Do you think it fills in such a gap? If yes, which I assume your answer is yes, otherwise you wouldn't have chosen it.
That would be the whole point of doing this in 3D and everything, because
but why
we have the assets. It takes preparation, it takes time, and it takes a lot of the right partners to go into this. And these are branching into multiple industries and disciplinaries. And not a lot of teams want to focus so much on many other of these aspects. It requires years of work. It requires the right team mix. It requires a hell lot of preparation. Game worlds and IP franchises and stories is actually, story development is one of the, I don't know how to say this properly in English. Story development in games typically have least effects in the short run. Most people look into statistics, whether this is the rarest items, how powerful it is, and they move on. Yeah, they don't really look into the stories most of the times. And then, but the stories, if you invest enough time in it, it's this minor differences that eventually builds up to something great and pays off ultimately. But it's not something 100%
very. Agree. Yeah,
nobody really.
Unique.
It's not worth it. It's not worth it though, in terms of a business sense. That's why if you look at typical game models, very little games work on this franchise model. They would pretty much prefer to create a game, get funding, get publishers funding, or get open funding from Kickstarters or from the users, and then publish the game out. Typically a game life cycle is the hypest during the first year. After the first year, the development slows and the developers move on to another project, leaving a small portion of their operations team to maintain the servers until it's died down. And they all focus their resources into creating new games, new reskin games of the same, because the game model, the game mechanisms are proven all these years. Players like these games, but they want to be stimulated in other art forms, in other stories, in other animation styles. And so it's more efficient for most developers to really jump from one game to another, or reskin from one game to another, playing on the typical model, refining their game mechanisms from one to another. This actually fits the play to earn model or the play to earn economies. It's just like mobile games. You get a new game, people pay, people compete, and people pay everything, and then they move on to another game. They're okay. There's nothing to earn. In the play to earn, you have fresh new economies every 2 months. You pump a game out, you garner the funds from NFT sales and everything. You publish it, everyone plays it, but the economy gets sucked dry. And so the developers were already on the other game in another company, another brand name. The team may have developed another game with the same mechanisms, but a very different skin. And this time they learned, and maybe they rebranded. And so the players jump from this game to another to invest in another game. The game experience is still there. If on a play to earn basis, the players still get to earn a little bit, the early starters. And this model from mobile will be ported into blockchain, I guess. But on the other side of the model are franchise games that really intend to take the extra steps and the extra resources to develop the brand further. The risk also escalates and increases, of course, together. And so this is a riskier model, actually, for most developers or people, traditional developers and publishers, because every time we develop a new expansion content, a new series, typically when you see movies or games, the Matrix, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, it sort of dies down, this fervor, and it's hard to keep up unless you really try something new that's outside the typical game modes or the typical model you're building. That's why we have merchandising, we have animation series and shorts, and we have different parts of the commons to keep people engaged. And yeah, this is just the first
there's
model.
always the exception, right? Because I think, of course, Matrix got worse. Matrix is one of my all-time favorites, right? So Digits Club, Matrix, Harry Potter got worse, but I think Lord of the Rings 1, 2, and 3, they were great, but The Hobbit wasn't that great in terms of.
Well, Matrix was. I was really hyped for the new one. Actually, I grew up with Matrix as well, and Godfather as well. And but I didn't grow up with the Godfather, but I really, really loved it. So yeah, I still remember saying this about the Marlon Brando poster and how you're very similar to Marlon Brando, the way you talk. But Matrix, yeah, it was a little disappointed, but I guess it's just nostalgia playing. But I think there are some. That's what you're seeing nowadays in the movie business, is that you see remakes of really, really great classics. A lot of them are a big bummer or just a cash grab, but some of them turn into even better products.
Yeah, I like it when they take the style and they just change it a little bit. The Irishman I thought was amazing compared to the whole genre that wasn't that hyped anymore. And I heard that, I don't know, the director from The Irishman, who also did Goodfellas, which is also like a classic. He's
Scorsese,
making
come on.
a new, I don't know from the top of my head. He's been making the new Mafia movie, I think, from the same production team at least. I think it's coming in 2026, so we have to wait a while. But it's like the latest news that I got. And if that's like the pattern, yeah, I think there's something to say, definitely. And I think it's also an opportunity.
Sadly, it's a dying pattern, though. I think I remember one of the early community events I did was a trivia nights, and the second trivia night was a movie trivia night, and I initiated the community vote of what movie trivia do you want. I named Tarantino, I named Scorsese, I named George Lucas, and I named Marvel. And Marvel won by a huge landslide. Nobody really
Right.
cares about the
Yeah.
other directors. And
Well, I've
but yeah,
I've
I
heard
guess
the
it's the
names,
times.
but I don't know what they have made either. Like I have never
Oh,
seen, so I don't like action movies, so I've never even seen anything from Marvel's. When I talk about Marvel or DC or whatever these ecosystems are, I don't know which superhero goes where because I don't watch any superhero movies. I think I
my
only
God.
watch Suicide Squad. That's the only one that
You're
I
you're
watched.
you're getting yourself lampooned by these Marvel geeks and fans. I tell you, you should not say that publicly out loud, man. This is destroying your own viewership for the younger crowds.
Yeah.
But
No, I'm focusing on building crypto projects, right? So that's my excuse. That's why how I save myself. But all in all, I mean, the overall branding that goes along with it, I think it has huge opportunity, right? That things are changing,
that's
specifically with the whole crypto narrative as well, the bearish narrative, what you guys are doing. It's very easy for companies and even investors to look at the problems, but the Luna crash, like things I spoke about with other VCs, is Terra Luna crashing only brings even pushes innovation, right? So next time you will see crypto insurance funds that they will bring all kinds of things that they analyze the whole downfall of the Luna ecosystem, and they will be smart entrepreneurs 1 week from now or a year from now that analyze that case and basically build new things out of it, right?
well,
Which I
hopefully
think
that's
is
one way
the
to look at it.
opportunity.
I actually look at it in the way that I hope the hype based models gets a little education, the crowds that follow the hype based model, and more attention can be placed into the technology itself of blockchains and NFTs, what they could actually bring to the table instead
Fair.
of just hype. And 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 it's time for projects that really focus on the ones that really intend to stay and last. Well, it's not a cleansing of bad blood in my mind, even sometimes for bad, well, paper hands, so to speak, that will get easily burned. So well, everyone gets a little smarter, but will these new projects and everything really help with the seasons and cycles of crypto? I'm still skeptical of that because,
Hopefully.
well, after all, the main draw of crypto is decentralization, and without regulation of decentralization, always comes these risks. It's just it's sometimes humans follow the same cycle over and over as they repeat the same mistakes, but in bigger proportions, while masquerading from one cycle to another. But it's just a repeating cycle of greed and fast money, which is always interesting. I mean, the entire draw of crypto is still going to be the speed, the fluctuations. This is this
Yeah, but
is
I think that
adrenaline.
bring hypes as well, right? So like inevitable, the hype brings the adoption. It's like a matter of time. But yeah, you're right. Perhaps, hopefully, people learn that lesson. But I think to each individually, right? The investments carries risk, and if they overexpose themselves to the risk, you get burned. Same thing as playing with fire, right? You can play with a campfire, but at some point, if you play with gasoline and a campfire, you take too much risk. Likely, you get burned. And
Oh,
some people
oh,
get burned bad.
I don't know. I understand. But yeah, I'm an idealist, so I'll try to work closer with my community to see what games we can play to get their minds off it. I think education comes still at a great cost. That's what the good communities will thrive to become. And crypto is all about a lot of different communities banding together. And the
Definitely.
stronger communities that last through these cycles will become something really, really great. That's why I'm pretty
Digits Club.
bullish on this. Well, good luck out there.
Actually, with the storytelling, maybe some little alpha for my own community today. Um, we're doing like a triple A cinematic with like a real studio with real actors and stuff. Yeah, yeah. To bring for our agent NFT coming later. And we also did the whole storytelling. Now we hired a writer to continue on the lore. So it's actually kind of can relate to that because we also it cost a lot of money. We don't have direct ROI calculated into it. But the first chapter will be called Riddles in the Dark. Definitely.
I look forward to the female lead in there because having talked to you, I noticed you're quite the womanizer. So I
there
look
is a
for.
female
So
lead
I
there,
bet
yeah.
you must have maybe spent quite some time sourcing the right female lead. Hopefully,
Definitely.
the is the male. Are you the male lead?
No, no,
uh,
no, no. I'm not acting, but
okay.
the whole overview. There is definitely yeah.
Well,
You read my mind on that one. It's
well, you
definitely
you
going
need
to be
one.
a good one.
Not being sexist or anything, but honestly, great female lead is much needed to create the right advertisement campaigns and storytelling. It's just
But we
yeah.
also one thing is also that we didn't expect that we would go that route. It was just very natural with how we build the products, how we build the community. Again, for us, also central the
Sure.
community, the feedback, and then was just like, why not? With the greater vision of things in the future, right? Why not like attach a story to it and basically go a little bit beyond what the regular project would do, right?
Hmm.
And I feel like that's basically how we have our second conversation. We have some other partners on board now that also bring a better conversation to the table. It's way more in detail. You shared a lot of information about your VCs, the how much they invested. A lot of projects are like, oh, we don't want to talk about it, right? It's like I think it's interesting for everybody to know, and ultimately once you run through the vesting contracts or the tokenomics or the market maker, there's always a way to find it, right, on the blockchain. And that's the
Hmm.
great thing. If you just keep digging, everything is there. But I appreciate you, Frank, being super transparent with us. Your answers are always enlightening, especially on the merchandising side, because I always had the wonders why somebody would pay so much money for that toy, but I do understand the specific market, the specific feeling, the branding. Definitely interesting. Before we go today, is there anything else you would like to add, perhaps?
Oh, not really. Would love to get back on here when we have when the breeding starts and when the game demo starts. Would love to get back with the crowd when the TG is back on the show and on the road. But right now, focusing on building stronger products, stronger fundamentals, and remodeling into a different roadmap to, well, really take a look at to get prepared for what's coming ahead for crypto. Hopefully, this will just be a short stumble for most of the crowds, and we'll be getting ready back to our roadshow for our TGE for the game and everything, and everyone will grow a little
Awesome.
stronger, and that's that. We'll love to
Perfect.
take a look at
Sounds
your
good.
cinematic. When's your cinematic? When's your roadshow? Or when's your preview
Oh,
coming up?
it's going to be a couple of weeks, but once
Couple weeks. Not
yeah, yeah,
bad.
yeah. Well, yeah, when I say a couple of weeks, I mean maybe like 6 to 8 weeks. It's still quite far out,
That's all right.
but
According to crypto, just give us snippets here and there, and it would be
there's so
okay.
many people involved in this. I never expected for a cinematic, so yeah, I can't say too much about it. But it's one of our favorite crypto cinematics that I've seen. We got a connection to that studio, and I think there's over 60 people working on the cinematics. I was like, just
Holy
some
crap!
computer work, but they're using real actors, real locations. It's huge. So yeah, I will definitely send you the link once that's ready. Obviously, it's one of our major marketing events, but
Have you disclosed which female lead, the name of the female lead yet?
I actually chose her today out of the lineup. So actually,
Oh,
like a couple of
an
hours
alpha.
ago,
How did you
it's
choose, Colin? How did you choose her?
I actually didn't even choose her on the looks. I chose her on her voice. So the voice is very
oh.
important for how we're going to present everything. And
What
she's
voice is that?
pretty. She's pretty. Not going to lie, she's pretty. But they were all gorgeous. But her voice was basically the touch where I was like, it just fits the story the best, right? And we had a
Wow.
huge variety to choose from, so it was definitely difficult. And with the male, it was a lot easier. I saw him, I was like, that's the dude from the lineup. It's just he's like the like the way I wrote what the character should look like, it was exactly that guy. So yeah, it will be definitely a good event.
Will you be disclosing the names of these actors or actresses anytime soon?
Well, when I receive it, I think we will do some teaser material on the socials. Yes, so definitely
we'd love to see. We'd love to see your final pick of the female, and especially on how her voice sounds like. Anyway, yeah, well, that's great. Not sure
awesome.
when we will do a live action of the dudes. Probably impossible. But for voice acting, we do have some early people in mind. But anyway, it's a long journey way ahead of us.
And we're here for it, Frank. We'll stay up to date with you when you have your breeding coming up or the next announcement. I will await your message, and I would love to have you back on here to have another follow-up, because we love what you're doing. It's looking good. You're super transparent. You're really aligned with what we're doing as well. So thank you so much,
Colin.
Once more. Everybody here today, thank you so much for listening. And I hope that you have a great rest of your week, Frank.
All right. You too, Colin.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, the Chits Club. All right.
Cheers. Bye-bye.